What's up, everybody? Brew Crew Podcast, back at you with episode 11. We're firmly into the double digits. It's me, Jules, got Chev on the line, and Eric is back joining us for another exciting episode. Today we're talking about more Zendikar Rising, a lot more Zendikar Rising. Last week, Chev and I discussed a lot of the mechanics and stuff like that, but now we're talking straight cards, baby. So, there's a lot to discuss. We have pretty much the entire set, so we've all just picked out a few of our favorites, and we're just going to go around and talk about them. Eric, you missed last week, so why don't you tell us what you're looking at over there? What's exciting for you?
For sure. So, as the resident Niam Mage, I just want to start off with a big, mean green creature, which is Cragplate Baloth. It is 7 mana, 5 and 2 green for a beast. It's got a kicker of 2 and a green. It can't be countered. It has hexproof. It has haste. And if it was kicked, it comes into the battlefield with 4+1/+1 counters on it. This has reminded me of previous powerful green finishers in terms of cards that can't be countered, cards that come in with a lot of stats, and cards that can immediately do things when they enter the battlefield. And so, if you have 7 mana, you could just... And in a set with a lot of landfall triggers, you might be wanting to push more ramp, and so you might get to 7 mana faster than usual. And then you can just drop a 6/6 with haste. And if you have the extra mana to spend, you can drop a 10/10 with haste, and your opponent cannot counter it. I think this is a powerful card, and I think it does a lot when it hits the field.
As our resident control player, big fan of like blue-white, especially in standard. I'm not excited about this. I think that we need to relax when it comes to these cards that one, have hexproof and also can't be countered. If you give one or the other, that's okay. I can deal with that. But both, and then also haste. Eric, I'm not big on blocking, so that's a lot of damage that's coming at me, and it's hard to kill hexproof things at instant speed.
Yeah, I think this thing brings a lot to the table, and like I said, it's reminded me of other previous green finishers. Other cards that I think are really interesting. We're staying on the line of large things, but this time I get to talk about just the best thing, which is dragons. Is Leyline Tyrant. This is 2 and 2 red for a dragon. It's mythic rare. It's flying. You don't lose unspent red mana as steps and phases end. When Leyline Tyrant dies, you may pay any amount of red mana. When you do, it deals that much damage to any target. So, if you've been playing an aggressive red deck, this comes down pretty well in your curve at 4. It's a flyer, it swings well, and it lets you store mana between turns if you're building up for any other large plays or late game plays. But if you aren't, because you're an aggressive deck, as opposed to like a more mid-rangey style deck, then you can just cash in your mana every time before you're about to untap, and eventually your opponent will have to kill this 4/4 flyer, and then you get to burn them for a ton.
Now, Eric, just to clarify, you can't use this to keep mana over turns. I believe it's just over a singular turn.
Is it? I thought
steps and phases is different than like... Well, if we knew the actual wording for Crewfix.
Well, let's look up the actual wording for Crewfix.
Or an Omnath, the original Omnath.
Right. Mana would empty from your mana pool. That mana becomes colorless instead.
Well, original Omnath is going to have the closest wording.
Doesn't empty from your mana pool.
It says green mana doesn't empty from your mana pool as steps and phases end. I'm going to read the Gatherer's text.
Yeah, I think this includes overturns, because if it doesn't, it's terrible. And I'm
or
no
even a
longer
later
excited.
turn. Yeah, no, yeah. You might be right. I had assumed that, like, when turns end, that's a second ability as opposed to, like, a step and phase. But I guess, yeah, like a cleanup phase or whatever, and then it carries over. That is much more ridiculous and befitting of the $14 pre-order price.
Yeah. If this did not do that, this card would be trash. Because
I like that
it wouldn't do anything then.
Yeah, I like that it for if you're playing a Dragons deck. I like that it comes down a little bit earlier in the curve. it kind of rounds that out because traditionally you're playing like 6 mana dragons and stuff or more. So it's nice that it kind of gives you a midpoint. I'm just worried that this thing is going to die like immediately. You're going to play it, and your opponent's either going to have instant speed removal or untap and kill it, and you're not going to get to reap those benefits.
Yeah, I think very rarely you're going to get to live the dream of this thing sits on field and you just get to keep banking red mana. Mm-hmm. But even if this is a 4/4 that when it dies can deal 4 or can deal a few extra damage, I think that's going to prove really punishing to your opponent if they have key creatures on board that they're trying not to block with and that they're trying to preserve. It's automatic burn built in that if they remove that creature, you can just pay mana in response and kill it. Mm-hmm. And kill something important of theirs.
I think
I think that overall this is cool. No.
I think it'll be nice I'm thinking from a standard perspective. I know you're probably thinking from EDH. I think this will be nice like for ramp decks like in the late game when you have like 9 lands and you like play this and you're like you want to attack for 4, but like you're ready to just pull the trigger at any time as soon as they target it, I think that's better. I don't know if you'd want to like do that in EDH though, if you'd want to like wait and then be ready to pull the trigger, but
yeah, mono red in EDH is a very volatile deck building archetype where some of it is all about certain archetypes and the other generals are totally about different things. But a quick shout out to Oak from Beyond. When this card was spoiled, he immediately called out Braids of Fire as just a ridiculous card with this creature, because it is.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And the other thing to keep in mind is Neheb the Eternal as a commander. With at the beginning of your post-combat main phase, add a red mana to your mana pool for each 1 life your opponents have lost this turn. That can also combo with it quite nicely.
That's kind
that would be really good, some might say. Another card that I think is pretty cool, a little bit of a reminder of something you might see in Modern, is Scourge of the Skyclaves, 1 and a black for another mythic rare. It's a demon. It has a kicker of 4 and black. When you cast this spell, if it was kicked, each player loses half their life, rounded up. But that doesn't matter, because Scourge of the Skyclaves power and toughness are equal to 20 minus the highest life total among players. Similar to Death Shadow, little different, because it also factors in your opponent's life, and it sort of has a different base toughness and power. But in older formats where people are playing a lot of shocks, people are playing a lot of fetches that are going to hurt you, or pain lands, or artifacts that are going to deal damage to you, this thing can get big quick, and it's very cheap and very easy to play. I think this thing is a threat.
So on that note, and we'll discuss these later, but we were looking at the large mythic cycle that on the backside has lands that enter untapped if you take 3 damage. So I was thinking for Death Shadow, and now that you're saying this, I was like, oh, so what if like turn 1 I just like play the black one, take 3, Thought sees you, take another 2. You know what I mean? Like
it is the highest. It's minus the highest life total among players.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. So,
but I'm just saying,
you got to rely on your opponent to also want to pay some life at some point in there. But they're gonna want to pay some life so that they can get out fast mana, so that they can get their good dual lands. Like, there's I feel like there's no deck in Modern that is willing to play slow enough and is willing to not lose this sort of life to get all the benefits, except for some of the monocolored Modern decks.
Yeah, and then you just play lightning bolts and you just bolt them, and then you're like, all right,
get 'em.
now Scourge. Here's my 2 mana 7/7.
And as soon as this thing hits them, like, it's bigger. So
oh yeah, that's
I
true.
think that's a pro, is that if you take down your own life total, this thing starts really growing as it hits your opponent. Whereas with Death Shadow, it has a smaller cap, sort of, in terms of its maximum power.
Right. So more mythics, huh?
Yeah, I like mythics, and I think everyone does. There are some really well designed mythics in this set, in my opinion.
They tend to be good.
Now, let me just throw out there what's coming next. It's another mythic rare. It's Ancient Green Warden, but this one I really like because it sort of fits a theme of the set on the whole. 4 and 2 green. It's an elemental with reach. You may play lands from your graveyard. Already looking good.
Nice.
If a land enters the battlefield, if a land entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. It is a 5/7. This thing, is thick. It's just a good stats for the cost, and it's got reach on top of that. But like the real big selling point here is lands entering the battlefield cause abilities to trigger twice, so you get all of your landfall triggers twice. And if you have any lands with abilities when they come in, this I think applies less to standard and more to other formats. Those trigger an additional time as well.
Right.
So I guess like Valakut could trigger additional times with this, or you could have to pay twice for your shock lands, but
That would stink.
that's not
I
good.
didn't even think of that. Yeah, wow.
Double scry.
Your
with
bounce
temples.
lands double bounce. That's great. No, but mostly I really like how this interacts with landfall triggers, and I think that this is a great way of sort of scaling up landfall effects without saying, oh, well, the big mythic rare has a big mythic rare landfall effect. Instead, it says, oh, the big mythic rare helps all your commons, uncommons, rares, helps those landfall effects matter more.
Yeah. Chev actually texted me earlier today, and it was just a picture of this card, and it just said, "So Tatiova, huh?" And I was like, "Yes, yes." Instant include.
I mean, yeah, this card's going to be really, really good in Tatiova. You're going to draw twice. You're going to gain 2 life.
And everyone will hate you more.
Yeah,
I mean, no one gets that mad at the Tat deck, usually because the Tat deck is just out there doing its thing, and then either like Joda or Maelstrom Wanderer or the Eldrazi are over just trying to end the world, and Tat's like, look, I have a handful of cards, and you're like, Julian, play a counterspell, and he's like, I only have 1 in the deck, and that's what tilts me about the Tat deck.
I have 2 counterspells in that deck. One's actual counterspell. One's Deprive, which returns a land to the hand, so that's like extra triggers. Because everyone was mad at me because my Esper control deck had like 5 counterspells, which if you think about it is not even that many. And also Oak always, you're like, no one hates on Tatiova except for Oak. Literally kills it every chance he gets. He'll be like,
It is fun to kill Tatiova.
It's a 5-mana 3/3. How is that not bait for murder?
Because it's a 5-mana 3/3. It's just like, I don't know. Focus your energy somewhere else. The fact that Chev has like, doubled his Urza Incubator or something. But that's a topic for another day.
Yeah.
Me? No, I would never do shenanigans with artifacts.
But anyway, that's Ancient Green Warden. It doubles your landfall triggers, and it doubles some of your abilities of lands that you may not want doubled, or you may want doubled. You're the only one who knows.
I'm really excited, and I really hope someone has this card out and doesn't know about an interaction like that. And when I say that, I don't mean like new players, because that would be scary. But I'm talking about one of you punks, like dropping a shock or something when you have this out, and it just boning you for 4.
That would be really funny. I also hope that at some point in like, this isn't going to happen, but I want it. This card is not going to see like top level play. I don't think it's good enough.
No.
It's too expensive, and it doesn't do anything when it hits the field. But I hope that it like makes it into some like niche tournament play, and then someone like messes up and like kills themselves with a shock land. I want that to be recorded for the greater purposes of the world.
What? So we'll find it.
But
it'll happen.
Moving on. Seagate Stormcaller.
Is this another mythic? Oh my god, hold on.
It might be another mythic, Julian. Well, we're sensing a trend.
It's a mythic. What the heck?
It is a mythic.
At least
I'm
it's
sorry.
Blue. It's blue though.
All right. This is spoilers up ahead. Julian put 2 mythic cycles on his list of things he wanted to talk about.
Incorrect, sir. 1 mythic cycle.
Put 1 mythic cycle?
Yeah.
My bad. Anyway, 1 in a blue, human wizard. This thing belongs in your party. It's a mythic rare. Sorry. It is a kicker of 4 in a blue. When Seagate Stormcaller enters the battlefield, copy the next instant or sorcery you play with converted mana cost 2 or less. This turn when you cast it. If Seagate Stormcaller was kicked, copy that spell twice instead. You may choose new targets for the copies. I think that this works fine with targeted spells in terms of in EDH, this is a good way to double your Pongifies, double your Rapid Hybridizations, or if you're looking to do something a little sleazier, you could double your Dramatic Reversals, tap out, and then recast the Dramatic, and really start getting a lot of mana in your pool. But I think it works better with sort of untargeted effects like Dramatic Reversal, where they are either draw effects or more global effects or sort of more long-lasting things where you copy it and then it doesn't really necessarily matter whether or not it has a target. I think there are a lot of really good 2-mana spells that this can copy in pretty much every format.
I don't understand why this is a mythic.
It doesn't feel very mythic.
Oh, rare, yes. But I'm just thinking, like, if you kick it, it's what, 7 mana?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's 7 mana kicked.
Like
5
you should get to copy it, like, 3 times or something, or like cast it for free, or. And also, it's only 2 or less. Like, at least make it like 4 or less or something. You know what I mean?
I think I would like it better if the kicker upped the cost that was permissible. If it said, like, you can copy it again, and it can be up to 3 mana or something.
Yeah, they could
I feel like this will cause problems regardless, because there is enough stuff at 2 mana. So while it would be cool if it's more powerful, I will take the side and say I'm glad it's not.
Yeah, I think it's in a weird spot of it doesn't feel necessarily like mythic in power level the way it currently looks. But I don't want it to be that much better.
Yeah, it's just the rarity for me. It's just the rarity for me. This doesn't feel like a mythic. It'd be interesting if they did like a kicker with an X in it. So like X is like, oh, if you kick it like blue X, and then now if X is 4, you can cast something with 4 or something, you know. But like, you know.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting. Mostly, I sort of like the design of this card of like sort of a small 2-mana thing that you can fling out there and immediately copy something. And I think that is the way it's going to be used almost always is the 2-mana version. And then sort of similar to the Leyline Tyrant, if you draw this in your, like, at the end of the game and you have like a draw spell in hand that's cheaper or lower to the ground, then you're going to kick this and draw 3 times instead, or triple sort of some other effect. But I think that most of the time this is going to be used as a doubler, and I think it's going to be one of those cards where you're like, man, why is this so expensive monetarily? And the answer is going to be because it's just really good for 2 mana.
So I have a quick question just to confirm what I think, and if there's any viewers who are also confused. So when it comes to a spell with converted mana cost 2 or less, if I have a spell that costs 2 mana, has a kicker cost of like 3, and I were to play that spell, pay the kicker cost, would it get doubled by this card? Because my thought is yes.
I had the same thought about Cyclonic Rift, actually, where if you overloaded Cyclonic Rift, would you get a copy? But then I realized that doesn't matter for Cyclonic Rift because it already hits everything.
Right, and I did pull up Cyclonic Rift because that was exactly the same vein, and I am seeing a rule listing casting a spell with Overload, and Overload is, I believe, just a different form of kicker. With Overload, doesn't change that spell's mana cost, you just pay the Overload cost instead.
It's like an alternative cost.
I think it would work with kicker.
Yeah,
because in the set where kicker's a big thing, I feel like that's a important distinction.
Would you copy a kicked version? Because that would be getting spicy.
I think so. Because I think this might be even better than I thought it was initially.
I'm quickly trying to see if I can find a different spell with kicker.
Wait.
And
So
find some logic on it.
This isn't one that I wanted to talk about, but I was just looking down and like conveniently a few down from the Seagate Stormcaller on the thing is Maddening Cacophony, which is a 1 and a blue sorcery. Each opponent mills 8 cards. If the spell was kicked, each opponent mills half their library. So just I don't know, double that maybe, and
I vote yes.
Win the game.
And what's that? What's that? Mill legendary from Jumpstart? Doesn't he double all millings?
Yes, I forget what his name is, but yeah, the advisor. Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be that's looking pretty
Pop
hot.
That, pop a 2-mana mill. We might have some mill and historic there, Julian. You'll have to tell us how that is.
All I'm saying is I want to be part of that. If that's going on, I'm there.
The mill and historic. All right, I'll let you know. I'll let you know. You can
We'll
be there for the
toss
gameplay
some
video.
crabs in there. Toss a little green. Get some Simic mill going. It's gonna be fresh.
Hey, I was telling Chev we got double the crabs in modern now. We got the crab in this one and the other crab. So, but
I'm thinking maybe a gumbo themed deck, just all mill, all crabs, all sea life. I might
could
also be hungry.
Gumbo, I thought you said Gumby for a sec.
Gumby.
We could also have a Gumby.
Yeah, we could have a Gumby.
Sorry,
deck.
where is the rubber man again?
Next Wizards crossover event. Forget Godzilla. Now we got Gumby.
Yes, dude. All the changelings. Like Chameleon Colossus, but he's Gumby.
All changelings, all Gumby, all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was sort of all I had to call out in terms of specific cards. Either you boys have a preference of who goes next?
I think Julian should go.
All right, I'll go. All right, let's get this thing out of the way. I sort of cheated and also sort of took one for the team and did the cycle of mythics that are like lands on the back half and then these like obnoxiously costed spells on the front. So an example would be Amiria's Call, which is 4 generic and triple white for a sorcery. Create 2 4/4 white angel warrior creature tokens with flying. Non-angel creatures you control gain indestructible until your end of your turn. And then the backside of it, because it's a DFC, if you remember what those are, dual face card. It's a Amiria Shattered Skyclave. As Amiria Shattered Skyclave enters the battlefield, you may pay 3 life. If you don't, it enters the battlefield tapped and it adds a white. So similar to how the shocks are named, these are being called the Bolt lands because you have to pay 3 life instead of 2. And then there's, ones in blue, black, red, and green as well that all have these they're all like triple of the color plus usually a lot of mana or maybe an X, and they do silly things. What do you boys feel about these?
I have a rules question just to start the conversation.
Yeah.
When you, let's say I play a card that lets me tutor any land to my hand, can I choose these?
No.
No?
They have all the characteristics when they're not on the battlefield. They have all the characteristics of the front side, which I remember reading somewhere, and you can tell because it has 1 triangle on it. And that was the specific language used. If it has 2 triangles, that is the back. And you can check. But yeah,
that is very strange.
So like most DFCs, or dual face cards, if you will, they have all the characteristics of the front card when they're not on the battlefield. And so they can only be tutored as a sorcery. If they're in the graveyard, they're still a sorcery. And this is true for all of the DFCs in the set.
Got it. That makes sense. I figured that it would be a little strong if they had also the characteristics of lands, so I just wanted to double check on that. But overall, I really like the design of a lot of these. I think that they're all they all sort of find a good spot in their color pie. And they all sort of do exactly what you would expect. I think the green one is like a little nuts, but
it's a Genesis Wave altar, right?
No.
It's just one that, if you accidentally get a Elvish Mystic, it's going to be a 4/4 Elvish Mystic.
Yeah, but I guess it doesn't have doesn't feel as constrained as Genesis Wave. Because let me just confirm.
That's true. Genesis Wave is like tutor for a mana cost X or less.
Genesis Wave is much better than this card.
Mm-hmm.
I think it depends.
How so?
Oh, because Genesis Wave is any number of permanent cards with converted mana cost X or less, not just one.
That's fair. Yeah. I guess I was recently building a Primal Surge deck, and so my mind was on Genesis Wave is worse than Primal Surge, and so.
Well, in that deck, yes.
But I do think that I still think that card is gonna be pretty powerful. That is an effect I would be willing to pay 7 mana for if I knew I had some big beaters such as I don't know, Cragplate Baloth in my deck.
Do you guys see these making a dent in more Eternal formats? Like, are there any decks you guys have that you would swap out a land for one of these or something of that nature?
Jeff, I'll always swap out a land.
This is true.
Yeah, like perhaps too.
So this is more of a Julian question. Eric will take all of these and put them in his 5-color deck immediately.
So I have a few thoughts. One, I think that these are not that great, especially at the cost that they are. And the fact that it's like triple
of a color,
triple mana pips. I think that's nullified by the fact that these can just be lands, but I don't know unless you're like a really long running control deck and you want to put in like one of these for like potentially your top end, because you always want to hit your land drop. So if you just have to put this as a land, it's fine. But I think most decks aren't going to play these. The white one seems like pretty medium at best. Like it's two creatures and they're tokens, so like they can just be bounced, and then giving your stuff indestructible until next turn is really not that big a deal. The blue one just draws cards, which like if you're paying
7 for card draw.
Yeah, it's just not like how often are you gonna actually draw that many? And like if you're gonna go and draw a bunch, especially in something like EDH, you might as well be drawing like 20 cards or infinite cards. So I think this is just like not great. I think the green one I don't think it's bad because obviously getting to put anything onto the battlefield like that is good, but you can always whiff. Plus, there's just things like Genesis Wave or Primal Surge that gets you everything as opposed to one thing. I think the red and the black ones are the best because getting to like they're the variable ones, so like you can deal a bunch of damage and then with the red one and potentially double it if you have 6 or more. That's like a great card that you could play with Leyline Tyrant. You just like save up your red mana and then just pop a big one of these and absolutely destroy stuff. And then of course reanimating stuff is great with the black one.
So to be clear, the black one's text is 3 black and X. Return from your graveyard to the battlefield any number of target creature cards that each have a different converted mana cost X or less.
Right, which if you're playing something like an Aristocrats deck or something that has a lot of sacrifice synergies or some sort of combo like that, you really only needs to be like 3 or 4, and you can get a bunch of tasty things. And then assuming you're doing like Cabal Coffer shenanigans, you can get pretty much your entire graveyard back.
Yeah. That's crazy if someone's running Cabal Coffer. What do you think, Julian?
I think it would be pretty powerful. Hopefully no one in our playgroup does that.
That would just be a shame.
In terms of things like standard, modern, no chance. Legacy and vintage, probably no chance.
I don't know enough about them to say no, but I don't think so.
I think big no on those formats.
Yeah, I mean, even the decks, there are some decks in those that generate a lot of mana, but when they're generating that mana, they're just like generating infinite and winning. They don't need to worry about doing these shenanigans. In standard, right. I think that I think the red one will probably be good as like a one of in like a teamer sort of deck that just like burns to the face. If control is a deck that exists, I can see the blue one or the white one being like a one of or a 2 of, because like I said, you can play them in the late game and they're powerful. or you can play them just as like a tap land in the early game, and that's fine, but they're not going to be doing anything crazy. The black one is hard to evaluate. I don't know if there's going to be enough. I don't think there's anything cheap enough, but like high impact enough that you would want to pay like 4 or 5 mana on this, aka X being 1 or 2, to really do it. And I don't think anything's generating enough mana to get crazy with it. And then I think Turn Timber Symbiosis, you just play Genesis Ultimatum. It's just better. So
yeah,
that's my thing on that. I do like the design space they're hitting, and I like that they're not stupid powerful, because if they were, we would just be like, all right, well, this is a slam dunk. Like, everything's going to play this. It's going to be busted.
Right.
But the fact that they're, you know, the fact that you really have to think about if you want them, but they are cool. Like, this is a casual's dream, right? Like, if you're just getting into EDH and you see something like that, you're like, boom, slam every single one in my 5-color deck. So, I like that.
I do think I might put Turn Timber Symbiosis into a Joda deck. Like, pay 7 mana, rip a Void Winnower, loving it.
Why you gotta say Void Winnower?
Because it's in the deck and is good.
For those of you who don't know, Void Winnower is Julian's favorite card. He actually has a large signed poster of Void Winnower a little bit to his right now.
Yeah, it's just off camera, so you guys can't see it.
How would you guys have felt if the red spell were allowed to go face?
So, Eric, can you read out the red spell to us word for word? Just for those
of course.
Who haven't
My
looked
apologies. I didn't realize that one hadn't been read out loud already. X and 2 red is the front. It is Shatter Skull Smashing.
Great name, by the way.
It's a sorcery. Shatter Skull Smashing deals X damage divided as you choose among up to 2 target creatures and or planeswalkers. If X is 6 or more, Shatter Skull Smashing deals twice X damage divided as you choose among them instead. So, I think that 2 is kind of a low limit, but making it unlimited might be a little whack against sort of smaller, wider decks where they have a lot of 1/1s, and just, if you paid X is 5, you could just clear their board. And so sort of one of my thoughts when I saw this, just like in the middle of reading the card, was like, oh, is this going to go face like when X is 6 or more? Like, is that going to be an option that turns on? And so I wonder if that at one point that was a design space they explored, because I think that would be interesting.
Yeah.
If it could go face, but the damage to the face wasn't doubled, because
right, instead
silly.
of doubling damage, it would be damage to face instead. I mean, if it was that, then I think it would be like just 1 mana. I mean, I think you'd end up basically paying like a 1 mana extra for a fireball or something. Which, I mean, if there's a land on the back in red, I would be a fan of that card. This card, I'm also a fan of, not to the same extent, but mostly because in Eternal formats where I normally find myself, this just seems not that good.
Yeah, I really wish it didn't have the limit on 2 creatures. Because if I'm going to sink a bunch of mana in this to kill a bunch of stuff and get the double damage payoff, I don't want to hit 2 things.
You'd want something more like Earthquake?
Yeah, I feel like that would be more what I would want from this. Where once I got to the double damage, I could just start spreading it out. Because if you pay X is 6 and double the damage, that means you're trying to kill 2 6/6s on average, I guess. And if you're behind by 2 6/6s,
and you have to put all your mana into this as opposed to something else, it seems a little bit daunting.
Anyway, that was one card that I sort of thought was the most like interesting space of all of them. I like the black one the best. I think that's the most powerful.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. I think it's probably a standard consideration for going face, just because we've had expansion explosion has been in the format for so long, and not just like with all the ramping that Team of Reclamation used to do.
Yeah,
that would easily deal like 17 damage or something. So I think they probably just didn't want to go there. But yeah. I think it's more of a standard card. I don't know if it'll hold up in EDH unless you're like, I don't know. I mean, you can really kill two things. It's not. I mean, it's nice if your meta has a lot of planeswalkers. You can just zap the planeswalkers.
Get them done.
We don't really. I mean, our meta barely plays planeswalkers at all.
Except for
the second they get played, they generally get nuked.
That's also true.
No. All right. Well,
there was that one deck, wasn't there? The
Oaks America
Planeswalkers.
That deck was a mistake, and I'm upset that I contributed to that.
I hated playing against that.
It was terrifying
every time.
That deck really sucked.
I think to be clear, like we're not saying that particular strategy was rough, even though it was. We're more saying that it really crimped the interaction you could have. So I mean, if you're getting together with your friends every once in a while and you're trying to play a intensive game of Magic with all of them, that's a deck where you can go and get a drink multiple times per game and not miss anything.
Yeah, it basically was just allowing a play style that wasn't really cohesive for what our playgroup was trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be a great deck to take to the pubs and to go out and win some games.
And then get beat up at the pubs.
Is that the?
I think that
is that what pub stomping is?
Well, yeah, pubs is like local competitive play. Is like that's what.
Gotcha. So I thought you meant the establishments, and I was like, oh
no.
Seems like an aggressive place to try.
If you're of legal age,
if you're of legal age, stopping by the pubs.
That's
bringing
why
your Magic deck with you.
That's what the term pub stomping is like going to like a local competitive scene and bringing something that is meant for a global competitive scene, or in like video gaming. If you're really,
that's so much more wholesome than where my mind went. Which was a bunch of angry drunks taking it out on you.
Well, Chev, we just got out of college. Anyway, another card I'd like to talk about, another red X-Spell, actually. Nahiri's lithoforming. So we talked about the fact that Nahiri is like the one of the face walkers of this set, and she has her own card, so she's on the art doing things, moving lava around. Sounds like what?
I just said doing something. I can't really make out what she's doing besides dancing with some lava.
Clearly, lithoforming.
She's manipulating the rock, Chev. So this is a X red. It's a sorcery. Sacrifice X lands. For each land sacrificed this way, draw a card. You may play an additional X lands this turn, which enter tapped. So I like this one. It's like, if you're playing a red-green deck, this is an easy way to just like put lands in your graveyard. It's not like a proper scape shift, but it can be if you draw a bunch of lands or if you're just flooded. You can, sacrifice excess lands that you have and get that nice card draw, especially like in a big burst if you really need to, which is something that like red doesn't have. And then also, obviously, if you're playing this in a deck with other colors, you can capitalize on things going to the graveyard, or the fact that lands are in your graveyard if you're playing green and you want to like do things with like Titania or Crucible
Ramanop Excavator.
Yeah, that sort of stuff.
Or that Ancient Green Warden, that card I called out earlier.
Yeah, exactly. So I think this is a cool card because it explores a design space that hasn't really been explored, especially in red, and it's a nice burst of advantage for red that is it feels very red. It's very impulsive. It's like, all right, well, we're gonna drop these lands and hopefully we draw what we need. So
and this is the first time that an ability of playing additional lands has shown up in mono red. So I'm wondering if this is a step in a certain direction, or this is kind of like for the flavorfulness of this card and for the set, this is an ability that red will be granted.
I don't think this is something we're going to see a lot.
I do. I know some things about Modern and other older Eternal formats, though most of my specialty is in EDH. Do you think that this could find a home in a Valakut deck? Where you sacrifice everything except your Valakut and try and draw a bunch more mountains and play him out and try and just bolt your opponent for a bunch?
Probably not.
I don't know enough about, but
probably not, just because
Julie
Primeval
does.
Titan and Scapeshift are already so effective. And this doesn't guarantee you the lands where those cards do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
Unbanned Primetime, by the way. Unbanned Primetime.
in EDH, hell no.
Unbanned Primetime.
That seems like a terrible idea. I think this could be. I think this is a good supplementation to that sort of package if you're doing something like that in, kitchen table Magic or in EDH. But I think in something as tuned as like a modern Valakut deck, I don't think that this is
Gonna make the cut.
It doesn't have the certainty of something like Escape Shift or a Primetime.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
I wish though, if the deck played this card, I would 100% go into modern.
I think I honestly think it might. I think that if they wanted another effect that could sort of get them that consistency and could sort of get them, because I think this effect is gonna be not super consistent. Like obviously, you're not gonna draw exclusively lands, so your land count in total is going down. But if you're close to killing someone, and you can find the mana to sort of tap out and sacrifice lands, and then maybe you get 2 or 3 more lands down, that's a healthy amount of damage. Especially in a format where people are self-inflicting a lot of wounds.
That's true. I mean, it would be interesting as like, I just can't see it being played as a 4 of. It'd be like a 1 of, because like if you draw this over anything else in the early game, it kind of feels bad. But it is like that perfect like clutch card. You just pull this and you're like, all right, we're going all in, sacrifice all my lands except for Valakut, So,
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on. Another sort of cheat, but we're going to talk about the inscriptions, which are not a full cycle, as I realized just before recording. But these are all sorceries. There's a blue one, a black one, and a green one, and they're a combination between, I guess, like a charm and the command cycle.
Yeah.
So here's one just to give you guys a taste. So this is Inscription of Ruin. It's a sorcery for 2 and a black, and then they all have kicker. This one's kicker is 2 black black. Choose 1. If the spell was kicked, choose any number instead. And then you have target opponent discards 2 cards. Return target creature card with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, and destroy target creature with converted mana cost 3 or less. I like these cards just because, and I wanted to highlight them just because having these modal cards is always cool. And it's just nice to have sort of a catch-all, especially if you're playing like a 1 or 2 of. And then I do like the fact that if you kick it, if it's the late game, you can just boom, have your cake and eat it too.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts, boys?
I'm kind of like, I want to see one in action before I'm really, like making an opinion, because at least for the abilities on, say we do a fully kicked Inscription of Ruin, and so we're having someone discard 2 cards, which, okay, and then we're returning a card with converted mana cost 2 or less and destroying a target creature with converted mana cost 3 or less. I mean, I guess the cost, the initial cost shocks me for all of those things, but at the end of the day, you are doing 3 very unique things. So I guess the question that I have, and hopefully, somehow this will get answered throughout the environment, is how often these are cast for just one mode, or are they usually kicked? Because I'm not sure, with Inscription of Insight, it's the blue one, a blue and 3, and then kicker is another 4. So for 8 mana, am I returning 2 target creatures, scry 2, draw 2, and then creating an XX blue illusion creature token, where X is the number of cards in hand. And so they all seem like decent enough abilities, but I do wonder at the total cost, or if maybe like kicker being a little bit less, and instead of doing all 3, you choose 2 as opposed to 1, or something like that.
Yeah, I think one of the ways that people often evaluate modal cards like this, and cards with like very distinct separate parts, is to sort of like try and split it up and say, well, would I pay 1 for that? Would I pay 2 for that?
Mm-hmm.
And so, just sort of looking at Inscription of Ruin, I feel like I would pay a black and 1 for any of those effects by themselves, and then saying, okay, pay me an extra 1 to do all 3.
That's fair.
Just to sort of say, well, that's not 3 cards, it's 1 card, so that's sort of reducing hand space and things like that. I think that looks like when you look at it that way, it looks much better. But unfortunately, you can't pay for it 2 at a time. You have to pay 7 mana up front all at once.
Right, and have a card in your graveyard that costs 2 or less, and something on the field that costs 3 or less. And then the discard will most likely always be effective. But yeah, I am interested. I think I like the green one the most. It is the cheapest as well. It's a green and 1 in instant, and kicker 2 generic and a green. And the 3 modes are put 2 1/1 counters on target creature. Target player gains X life, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. And then target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. So I'm already, seeing that for any one of those, I would probably pay 2 mana for, especially at instant speed. And then, for the 3 extra mana, being able to beef something up and then having it fight another creature. And I guess the life gain is a decently meh ability, considering all the other ones. But the other 2 modes, I think, make it pretty powerful.
Yeah, I think that one is the one that is the most designed to be cast for its full cost. Because the order it reads in is, hey, make one of your creatures bigger, then gain life equal to your biggest creature, then have probably your biggest creature, or a creature with death touch, I guess, fight something else. And so it sort of is meant to go down that line and resolve in that way. Whereas the black one, all the effects feel a lot more disparate in terms of like, okay, my opponent's discarding cards, I'm resurrecting something, and I'm killing something. Those are all very separate, and that one feels more like it was meant, like, sure, you can cast it for the kicker, but any of the individual options are just as good individually, whereas the green one, I think, is the best package. And the blue one has, like, good packaging elements as well, where, like, I guess technically you could return 2 of your own creatures if they had good ETBs or you wanted to bounce them or something. Then you could draw 2. Then you could make an XX blue illusion that would technically be 4/4 larger than it would have been at the start of the turn, because you have 2 more creatures and 2 more cards in hand.
What do you think, Julian?
I think, surprise, surprise, I think the blue one's the best. Yeah, I think, Chev, like you said, the green one is going to be cast because it'll only be 5 mana total, which is like a big difference from 7 and 8 for the other 2. But I also think the green one has like the lowest amount of effect, so that makes sense.
Right.
I think that these will see play in standard, just because they are so modal, but they're there's nothing like super splashy about these. So I don't think these are going to be EDH cards, but I do. Once again, I just like the flexibility that they provide. So I think it would be interesting to, especially if you're trying to vary up your deck building, instead of including a charm or a command or something, just put one of these in instead. It just, adds a little bit of flavor to what can sometimes be just playing staples.
Yeah, right. I think that's very true. Anything that opens up your deck to having more options to play cards you want to as opposed to cards you feel you have to, I am definitely all for, especially in more eternal leaning formats.
Yeah. All right, next one I want to talk about real quick. Balaged Recovery, 2 and a green. Return target card from your graveyard to your hand. Easy and simple. And on the backside, it's just a land that enters tapped and taps for green. The reason I want to highlight this is because I think this card is going to be freaking great in standard. The fact that basically all of the decks right now, most of the best decks are some form of mid-rangey deck. This is just perfect for grinding, and most of them are green-based, so if you need it, this is just a land. So I just wanted to shout that out because that's just, great for getting back your Genesis ultimatums or your threat that died or anything. It gets anything. So I think that's like going to be an underrated card. It's just an uncommon. Last 2 cards.
Yeah, we haven't seen sorry. Go ahead, Julian.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't think we've seen something that's so clearly a regrowth in standard for a little while. Like a lot of the time, the graveyard recovery comes with some sort of stipulation attached to it. Like only creatures or converted mana cost X or less, or multicolored or X mana cost sort of thing. So I think, like you said, this definitely has the power to be super useful.
Yeah, definitely. last two cards I want to talk about are both colorless cards. So Chev, be happy, I guess.
I'm happy.
One is a mythic rare and one is a common. So let's talk about the mythic rare first. Lithoform Engine, 4 mana for a legendary artifact, 2 tap, copy target activated or triggered ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. 3 tap, copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. In 4 tap, copy target permanent spell that you control. So this has to be when it's on the stack, and then it says in parentheses rules text, the copy becomes a token. So that's cool because it's not just creatures. You can get enchantments, planeswalkers as well, but you do have to have the mana open to copy it while it's on the stack, since it says permanent spell and not just permanent.
You can't really get a planeswalker. They would die, right?
Yeah, legendary.
Because you can't control 2 of the same planeswalker.
Oh yeah, I mean, I guess
You could technically do it though, Eric.
You're right.
Well, you could do it with the Teferi, who can activate his abilities at instant speed.
That's not how that works. There's layers in states check before you would have a chance.
Don't talk to me about layers. We're not talking about layers on this podcast.
Trust me, it doesn't work. Okay, it doesn't work.
Okay, we'll trust you.
Yeah, the rules on Magic Arena say that it doesn't work. So I tried to. Well, I played Muxus and Goblins, and I got 2 Krenkos out, and I was like, oh, well, what if I just tap one for the Goblins first, and then I'll just let that one go, but it doesn't let you do that, so.
Doesn't like it.
Yeah. Anyway, this is just 4 mana for something like Commander is cheap, and I mean, even in Standard, like I was saying, there's so many mid-rangey, just kind of grindy decks that this seems reasonable, and it's just so, useful. Being able to
right.
copy target activated or triggered ability, something like a landfall trigger from the new Omnath, or Uro's enter the battlefield trigger, and then of course once you're copying instants and sorcery spells or full on permanents, then it's just so useful in basically every different scenario. I couldn't help but highlight it.
Now, something to keep in mind that was brought up, I believe, by a member of Wizards of the Coast staff. But hopefully someone can correct me if I'm wrong. When you copy a permanent spell, the token is not created. So things that care about creating tokens don't trigger, like Doubling Season. You wouldn't get 2 copies of the token that you created by copying the spell.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, I guess. That would be, just maybe a little bit much.
Scary. Yeah.
Do you then get the ETB of the token?
Yeah.
Or I guess you would always get the ETB of the token.
Right, because it entered the battlefield.
Yeah.
It's a bad question. Anyway.
Yeah, so I don't know. Really cool card. If you guys want to say anything else, otherwise, I just
definitely
thought it was.
It's kind of like a Swiss Army knife at an affordable cost for anything that cares about. I mean, there's been a lot of chatter of Commander auto include, but there's always a card like that in every set. I'd be interested to see how often I'm not sure about Standard play. This to me clearly reads as hey, Commander players, this is for you. And so I am interested to see how much this actually ends up being put into Commander decks, how much it's useful in those decks, and how much of the effect feels forced versus a useful ability. Because to me it feels like maybe the doubling instants and sorceries or copying those spells is a one synergistic thing, but unless you're playing Riku, then having that and copying permanent spells on the same card feels a little 2 different directions. So I am interested to see which decks can capitalize on this the most.
Yeah, I think it's just purely a value thing.
Just a value thing?
Yeah.
I think I would put this in the Kai card deck I have brewed up. Because most of the time it's going to be copying instants and sorceries, but then sometimes if I'm about to play a big mana rock, I might be okay, well, I'd like a copy of that too.
Yeah. Okay, so it's basically, just value town whenever you want.
Yeah, I mean, kind of how a lot of decks just play Panharmonicon, it's just similar idea.
Yeah.
It's good.
I do think this might have a home in Standard. I'm really hoping it does, and I will be trying it, so here's fingers crossed to that.
All right. What's the idea that you think about it with Standard, Julian? What do you want to see it played with that would be interesting?
Well, like I was saying, this with Omnath seems really good, if that's a thing. I mean, Uro is the easy answer.
I was just wondering if you had a particular card from the set or something that felt a little spicy to you that you wanted to try copying.
I mean, anything with Planeswalkers is good. So, like, I'm looking at if, Nissa of the Shadowed Boughs is her -5, put a creature card with converted mana cost less than blah, blah, blah from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield. Getting to double that is pretty sick.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could double up. You could double up on the Seagate Stormcaller, the 2-mana mythic that Eric was talking about earlier. I mean, there's a whole.
That would actually be pretty spicy.
There's a whole host of things that you could do with this. It's just finding the right shell, because obviously you could throw 4 of this and just a bunch of things with sick ETBs into a deck, but it doesn't mean it's gonna pan out.
Right. Yeah.
So. I think it's going to be it would be like a 2 of at best, really.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anyway, I've been talking long enough. Last card I have to shout out might be my favorite card in the set. It's a common. It's an artifact. It's called Spare Supplies. It's 2 mana. It enters the battlefield tapped, which is like, why? Why does it need to? When it enters, draw a card. 2 mana, tap it, sack it. So you can't even do it in the same turn. Thanks a lot. Draw another card. I love this card. I think it's so. Just utilitarian, just like it's literally just a picture of a rucksack with some stuff in it and a machete.
Mm-hmm.
But you get to draw your cards when you need to. You get to pay it in installments. I love this card. So
the layaway plan. Hey,
exactly.
It's colorless. 4 mana, draw 2. A wonderful rate.
Yeah, traditionally draw 2 has been a blue and 2. Recently, that has been cut down somewhat to maybe a blue and 1, or a blue if you're feeling really, really spicy.
Conditional.
Conditional. So this is unconditional, 4 colorless, draw 2 over 2 turns, and I think that is exactly on rate, and that the colors that don't get a lot of draw are going to love this.
I think this would be fun to play in limited, I think, a lot of the time. I mean, if you've got a spare slot, this might be something that you kind of just throw in there because it will probably pay it for itself in some particular way. But
definitely,
yeah, it's a cute little card there, Julian. It's a nice little thing you got going on.
Speaking of another cute colorless card, Chev, you got some ones you wanted to talk about.
Oh boy! So I mean, this is in a similar vein to the rucksack. If it costs a little bit more up front. It does set you back 5 mana. This one is Forsaken Monument. And we have a bit of a sad picture. One of the Eldrazi Titans, Ulamog, looking a little bit forlorn in the distance. I think it's probably his skeleton or something like that because he's supposed to be dead. So that hits me right in the feels there. And you don't get much for the 5 mana. I'm really just into it for the Eldrazi synergy. Colorless creatures you control get +2/+2. Whenever you tap a permanent for colorless, add an additional colorless. And whenever you cast a colorless spell, you gain 2 life. Really, there's just not a lot going on. And when I include it in my Kozilek deck, I feel like you guys just will be okay with it 100%. I feel like, it's one of those slide under the radar mythics, if you know what I mean.
I think you're underselling one of those abilities, and I think it might not be the first or third one. I think it's somewhere in between those.
Chev, I think you're full of garbage.
I mean, there's one thing to be said that now Kozilek would be a 2-turn clock on anyone because he's a 10/10 in Commander. But there is the other thing about...
That's a 3-turn clock, baby. You got to do 21.
Yeah, but he would be 24 if he hits you twice.
Sorry, I thought
doubling
he
math.
Started as an 8/8. That's my bad. Because you said he would be a 10/10, and I was like, isn't he already? Whatever. I don't know.
Yeah. So anyway, Kozilek would just smack you faster. And then the secondary ability, which has been pointed out a couple times, and luckily the card was just reprinted in Double Masters, but it does go infinite with Basalt Monolith. For those of you who don't know, 3 mana, taps for 3, pay 3 mana to untap it. So, of course, whenever you tap a permanent for colorless, add an additional. Now you're gaining 1 mana each time you tap Basalt Monolith.
Dude, everything and their mother goes infinite with Basalt Monolith and Grim Monolith.
Yes, but not everything and
hat.
its mother is colorless. and can fit into my deck nicely. So that's why this one has a special place in my heart, and I will be picking up probably a full art copy if I'm being real.
This one, that facepalm, that's for you, buddy.
Oh, thanks. Well, luckily, of course, I will be able to probably purchase one of these soon, and then you'll be able to do it in real life, Julian. I hope you're ready. Moving on from that wonderful Eldrazi synergy that, if you recall on a previous podcast, I was hoping we'd see at least a tiny morsel of here on Zendikar to know that, they're dead, but we haven't forgotten them. We're going to move to the opposite end of the spectrum before leveling out at the rare plane for Feed the Swarm. 1 black and 1 generic, sorcery. Destroy target creature or enchantment an opponent controls. You lose life equal to that permanent's converted mana cost. Which, if you guys have been following Maro's blog, is the piece of black targeted enchantment removal that was initially teased, and this is the first time black has ever gotten this ability. So, I personally, as the proud player of a recent Toshiro deck, find this incredibly fun to now be able to deal with enchantments that, without using Farika's Libation, or that one from the commander set that's another 1 and black, and target opponent chooses to sacrifice a creature or sacrifice an enchantment, something like that. Right. Yeah. But this is the first time black has been able to target and get rid of an enchantment. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
I still sort of don't, to me, I don't know how well it fits in black's traditional color pie, because again, this is the first time this ability's been printed, and Farika's Libation was dipping its toes in the water and was oop, am I over the line here? Am I good in this zone? And everyone was I guess you're fine there. That's sacrifice. That's what black does. And now this is just okay, this is enchantment removal, but you have to pay life. Which doesn't feel... It feels like they're almost using it as an excuse to give black enchantment removal. And sometimes for balance reasons, you have to do things that go outside the color pie. If you thought white or green were going to become too prominent because they're the only colors that can deal really well with... Listen, blink at me all you want with green's too prominent. Never prominent enough. So if you thought that white or green were going to be a problem because they can deal with enchantments, and you have a bunch of powerful enchantments coming up, so you wanted to extend that into other parts of the color pie, I think that makes perfect sense and is honestly a good design decision, even if it's not a good theming decision. And I think that this isn't bad enough theming that it deserves to be called out for it, so I'm happy to see it.
I believe the official sort of reasoning or some of the thought process behind it was black is supposed to generally be able to deal with anything, but it comes at a severe cost. And in this case, they're using that life loss as the cost. Now, personally, I remember voicing to Julian at one point, I didn't think the life loss was enough for black to be able to do this. The two other things that kind of go into it are, this is only an enchantment your opponent controls, and that's specific because black is the color for enchantments like Demonic Pact, where one of the modes is once you've done everything else, you lose the game. And so it's ways you can't get out of your own agreements with demons, but you can stop other people from benefiting from theirs, I believe is some of it behind it. And there was something about black struggling to deal with both enchantments and artifacts, and every other color being able to deal with at least one of them, if not both. So it was kind of okay, even red has its thing with artifacts, and now we're giving black that ability to at least deal with one of the two types, because it didn't seem fair that it could deal with neither. Now, there's different opinions brought up about that, particularly blue's lack of dealing with either one. But, being blue, it has access to counter magic and a few destroy target permanent spells that even black doesn't have destroy target permanent outside of running colorless.
Yeah.
I know, Julian made a face of confusion, but I'm 90% sure if I were to do a Scryfall search right now for Commander Black and text for permanent,
I was
get a lot more than I'm looking for, but
I don't think
Yeah,
blue
you should
has,
type destroy target permanent.
I don't
Maybe
think
you do
blue
that.
has destroyed target permanent. The thing with blue is it can't
Uh,
properly deal with anything. It can just bounce everything.
and
I,
then deal with it
one
when it
in a-
comes back.
The one in a blue instant exile, or is that only?
I
That's
think
only
that's creatures.
creatures,
A lot of it is destroy creatures. But yeah, that's true. They have counter magic, they have bounce magic. But right now, if you search for permanent and destroy on a mono black card, you are not left with much besides land destruction. Destroy target black creature, planeswalker, target non-black creature. That's basically it. So without the ability to do anything to a permanent, they felt this was an okay reach for black to be able to deal with enchantments in this way. But depending on feedback, they might go back on that.
yeah,
This might be a one-time only deal.
I'm medium on the whole thing because I understand the whole thing that like, oh, black can pretty much do what it wants as long as it comes at a price. I get that, but also it hasn't been able to deal with artifacts and enchantments, and I feel like that's just part. Every color has its downsides, right? So I feel like the fact is, if you're running black, either you're going to run another color to supplement those downsides, or you just accept the fact that the things you're doing as a mono black player are powerful enough, or you just don't care enough about other things like that you just aren't going to deal with them. I mean, I appreciate that they at least made it black where you lose that life. The thing is, some of the best enchantments are negligible. You know, hitting a
1 to 3 mana.
hitting a smothering tide is huge, but like 4 life, especially in a format like Commander, is literally nothing.
Ristic study.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I don't like that it's creature or enchantment. I would prefer that they just went all the way and they were like, all right, black, you get to destroy enchantments, but like this card will be dead in your hand. Like you don't get to just like, oh, like sideswipe a creature because there's no juicy enchantments out. You know, that feels like. Plus the other thing is
It's too flexible.
Yeah. Plus the other thing is, at 2 mana too. If it was like 4 mana, destroy target creature or whatever, then I'm fine.
I think at 4 mana that would not see play.
Which I think is reasonable. I said that right? It's 2 mana.
Yeah, it's 2 mana.
Yeah, it's 2 mana.
Yeah,
And
it
it's
certainly wouldn't see play in standard. I think anything that black can do to get rid of enchantments would still see play. I can think definitely running 4 mana for black enchantment removal in a mono black deck. Like any other color besides Rakdos, you'd have access to enchantment removal. But I think in mono black, I'd probably still run it.
Yeah, you still run it, especially because like 4 mana kill a creature is not ever bad. It's just not optimal.
Yeah.
The one other issue that I have, not huge issue, and then we can hop off this card, is just since this is like the one card, every black deck is now going to play this card like without fail. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And and the way to alleviate that is to print more cards that destroy enchantments in black, which I don't think is correct. So we're in like a catch-22 where now every black deck ever plays this card, but also you're probably not going to print that much variate. Like you might have like another card like this in another 2 years or whatever, you know? So as a sort of a color pie purist, it's shaky ground for me, but I'll let it slide for now because it's not like a widespread thing.
So now we get on to the last couple cards, and since we have been here for quite some time, I'll breeze over a couple of them, and then we'll talk
Jeff,
about
we're having
the
so
one.
much fun.
We'll talk about the one that's more interesting. So,
right, sure.
For the one that's not as interesting, but I really enjoy the space, would be Shadow's Verdict. It's 2 black and 3 generic. Exile all creatures and planeswalkers with converted mana cost 3 or less from the battlefield, and all creatures and planeswalker cards with converted mana cost 3 or less from all graveyards. And so, you know, we've seen black dealing with destruction, not on a damnation scale, but on a like converted mana cost 3 or less, or like I think generally 3 or less is the grouping. But also being able to get rid of them from graveyards is like, you know, we're wiping the slate clean of these, and I think that's a pretty cool idea, especially in more Eternal formats where I generally find myself, and it's like, okay, yeah, we're wiping the board, but we know the Reanimator players have got some tricks up their sleeves, so we're getting rid of them there as well.
Karador is sad.
I'm happy Karador is sad.
I'm happy because this hoses Uros in Standard.
Gets completely gone. Another spell that is Definitely a more generic ability, but I really appreciate where it was put, is Hagra Mauling. It's 2 black and 2, instant. This spell costs 1 generic less to cast if an opponent controls no basic lands, and it's destroy target creature. But wait, Julian, this is a DFC.
Oh,
and
no.
So if you flip it over, you have a mono black tap land. And so I think, particularly when we have so many crazy lands in this environment, there is a chance you'll be destroying a target creature for 3 mana, but also have the ability to just play it as a land when you need it is, I think, absolutely fantastic. And, I mentioned Toshiro before as my new kind of like pet deck that I've been kind of grooming to meet the standards of all my other ones, but easy include for me in that deck as, an additional land, also an additional destruction on an instant. But what do you guys think for other formats, or what do you think of this murder on a stick on a land?
I like that it's, like you said, I like that it is either a land or another, a spell. I like that modality. I think that 1 black is not necessarily where you want to be. Speaking from a standard perspective,
Right.
I don't think that's where necessarily, and also probably from an EDH perspective, there's better options, there's cheaper options. But like you said, you pay a little bit of that cost for the fact that this can help you hit your land drops. I like that it costs 1 less if an opponent controls no basic lands. I don't know how often that's going to happen.
Yeah, it's more of a fun thing than like an actual real
I
thing.
feel like you'd see that in something like Legacy or Vintage or potentially Modern, but in those formats you're not paying 3 mana to destroy a creature.
I'm personally waiting to play this against Eric's 5-color deck that I believe has 1 of each basic mana type in it.
If you're referencing Joda, yes, it has 1 of everything and then a second forest, because green is very important to me personally. I think that this is the safe version of this card, and I think that at some point in R&D there was probably the pushed version of this card, where this was 1 and 2 black, and this costs 1 less if your opponent controls no basic lands. And I think that the pushed version would have seen a lot of play, and I think the safe version isn't going to see a lot of play.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if this shows up in the design notes article that always comes out with a new set, where Morrow talks with the design team and they go over the steps on creating some of these cards, because that definitely sounds like a narrative that could have happened. I'd be interested to see if it did.
Yeah.
It does have phenomenal art and flavor text.
I mean, this core lady is just about to get worked. Like,
She has no idea. The flavor text is, Din, turn around now.
And the art is a giant creature about to eat someone's head.
Yeah, this poor core, she's in for a bad time.
And rounding out my count of 5, we have what some see as the first piece of tech against ramp. Confounding Conundrum, a blue and 1 enchantment. When enters the battlefield, draw a card, because why not? We're in blue. And then whenever a land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, if that player had another land enter the battlefield under their control this turn, they return a land they control to its owner's hand. I like it. I like it a lot. I think the ability to kind of deal with people who are trying to play multiple lands a turn, like those nefarious green players, is certainly a powerful ability to have, and I would very much enjoy watching someone play a ramp spell with this out and seeing all the kind of steps they have to do to deal with it. What do you guys think?
I just want to offer a plug for my recent Chulane deck. Please play this against Chulane. Do it. I won't love it. It won't let me win the game. I promise you're going to really enjoy that you played this card against Chulane. But actually, I think this is a really strong card, and I think that a lot of what Chev said is very true, in that it's good tech against like aggressive ramp. It's good tech against fetch lands. Even like evolving wilds is just terrible against this.
That's like dirty against like fetches. I didn't even recognize that. Oof.
And so I think that this card has a lot. I think this card is gonna find a home somewhere. Someone will play
Many
this
places,
card
yeah.
in high level play, in regular level play, in kitchen table play. I think this card is always gonna be good. I think this card is gonna get people mad at you though. If you were playing this in a multiplayer format where there is a table worth of people who are all trying to pull their fetch lands or are all trying to ramp, you will be a target.
I'm definitely okay with that, I think. Because
Yeah.
I still see, playing multiple lands a turn as kind of like, okay, the rule is 1, but we're going to do some sneaky stuff, and we're going to play 2 lands this turn. So the ability to just be like, nah, play by the rules doesn't exactly make me feel bad. And I will feel very happy playing this against Tat.
Only
And
2
on
lands a
that-
turn, Chev.
Yeah,
You're not really shooting for the stars there.
Joda,
Anything.
Dragon, pretty
As
much
someone-
every one of my decks.
Every
As someone
deck
who
that
only
has
has
green in
one green deck in Hapatra that is not known for its getting a bunch of lands out all at once, this sounds fantastic. And in the, I think, one deck I have that plays blue, this will probably be finding a home.
What is that deck?
Oakown and Cinder Split.
Don't you speak their name?
But
in
this one doesn't.
podcast.
This doesn't flip a coin though, Jeff.
I know. Sadly,
no
Oakown and Cinder Split have seen some changes recently, from being every coin flip card ever printed to more of a, okay, we're going to get Oakown out, flip him a ton of times, and then play Chandra's Ignition, which I believe is how they won their last game against, I think everyone was there when we were at Eric's over the summer.
Yeah.
Chandra's Ignition is a banger of a card. I like that card. Anyway, now we've fully drifted away from what this podcast was about.
Completely.
Wait, we're not flipping coins. We're not the flipping coins podcast.
There's no coin flips in this set. Don't even care anymore. We
Hey,
should
there's
rate
still
sets
time.
on how many cards flip coins. This one
Well-
got a 0.
It would just be like 0 out of 10 for most of them, and then some would be like a 2 out of 10.
That's true.
What if we rated sets based on how many dice they rolled? And
Ooh, that would just be unsanctioned, right?
Well,
no, I would just preemptively rate the D&D set with a 20.
I see. That would be interesting if they bring dice rolling into Black Border for that set. I feel like they have to do some amount of it.
They might. I don't think it'll have to deal with like D20s or anything, because I think they're going to want to keep it like in
D6s?
universe,
Yeah.
and more manageable dice that people will actually have on them, because
a lot of people have
spin downs,
like spin downs
aren't
though.
weighted.
But spin
Spin downs
downs
aren't
yeah.
weighted properly.
Mm-hmm.
Like they don't roll.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, does anyone have anything else they specifically want to call out or talk about? I just realized personally that Lotus Cobra is in this set. Totally missed it.
Oh
until
yeah,
just now.
buddy.
So Eric, that says something particular to Julian and I, and that really hurts because I believe in our first podcast talking about this set, we mentioned Lotus Cobra because it was one of the few spoilers out.
Very specifically.
Well,
so as
maybe
as
I
a-
had just forgotten after listening to our
yes,
beautiful,
that's it.
beautiful voices.
we did cover it at the beginning. You hear us drone on for an hour, you forget.
Exactly. I don't know. Sometimes you talk for something like, I don't know, like an hour and 17 minutes and 49 seconds. Sometimes it's really long.
Is that how
Well,
long
we
this has
better
been going on?
That is exactly how long this has been going on.
Yikes.
Hey,
we had
you
a
know,
lot
I
to
think we've
cover.
talked
We had
about a lot of
fun
good
cards.
stuff.
Cowards can't block warriors. That's all I have to say.
That is such a
I-
ridiculous card design. I love it so much. I almost included it. 3
I
different
missed-
modes. Each one costs 1 generic mana. One is cowards can't block warriors this turn. One is warriors get something. Julian, are you currently looking at it?
Chev. Cowards always can't block warriors, but if you pay 1, you can make something become a coward until an end of turn. So, and then you can also pump and like give trample and stuff. So, but the only thing that matters is that cowards can't block warriors. I want a shirt that says that. Can we get custom shirts?
Yeah,
We
that
could.
can be our first Brew Crew shirt, is Cowards Can't Block Warriors.
I'm so hype.
And then the next one's going to be Kill Tat.
I am very hyped for that one as well.
I don't know.
I
I don't know
would-
about that one.
Well, it sounds
very
like
sure
that's
this is Bolt
basically all the time we have for this week. rounding out this Brew Crew production, we have Eric, Julian, and Chev again, and hopefully we'll get Oakley next week when the full set releases. And this is us signing out.
Yeet.